Hey there, it's a Module 3 assignment overview. So here we're going to be using the same data set that we used last week, the real estate data set. And in fact, we're going to use that same sample of 30 observations that you used as well. Let's go ahead and read through the prompt a little bit and talk about the concepts this week. So this assignment picks up where the Module 2 assignment left off, and we'll use components of that assignment as a foundation. You have submitted your initial analysis to the sales team at DM Pan Real Estate Company. You will continue your analysis of the provided real estate county data spreadsheet using your selected region to complete your analysis. You may refer back to the initial report you developed in the Module 2 assignment template to continue the work. This document in the National Statistics Graph spreadsheet will support your work of the assignment. Note, in the report you prepare for the sales team, the dependent or response variable Y should be the median listing price, and the independent or predictor variable X should be the median square feet. Again, they're very explicit in that, but what I've mentioned in other videos, and I want to make sure you guys understand, sometimes it's hard to get, sometimes it's easy to get kind of caught up in the details and go, oh, I don't know where to start. Even if they didn't tell you the X and Y. In any situation, business situation, school situation, take a step back and think about what makes sense. Would I want to predict the square footage based on the listing price? No, I can't really see much of a business need for that. However, if we were brought a house that we wanted to list or have some idea of what range we should be looking in, it would make sense to use the square footage to help predict the listing price. So even though it's explicit, I just want to make sure you guys understand the concept and think about the bigger picture and just use a little bit of logic there to make sure you're on the right page. Okay, so use the Module 3 assignment template specifically address the following. So first it says regression equation. I'm not going to go through all the details on here. We're going to use the template to kind of walk through, but I do want to touch on this. So it does say to provide the regression equation, determine R and what it means. So remember, R is going to tell us, it's our correlation coefficient. That's going to tell us if these variables are correlated or not. Determine the strength of the correlation, weak, moderate, or strong. Discuss how you determine the direction of the association between the two variables. Is there positive or negative? And what do you see as the direction of the correlation? Examine slope and intercepts and draw some conclusions about that. Determine the value of the land only. You can assume when the square footage of the house is 0 that the price is the value of just the land. So that's telling you when X is 0, what's the Y-intercept. So in other words, when it says determine the value of the land only, that's telling you what the intercept is and how to interpret the intercept. And remember, in Module 2 and some of the zyBooks challenge activities, it talked about like what's the interpretation of the intercept, or does it make sense to interpret it? In some cases, it does not make sense to interpret it. One example of that would be if you want to predict gas mileage based on the weight of the car. Well, there's no car that weighs 0 pounds, so it makes 0 sense to interpret the intercept in that case. However, in this example, it tells us when X is equal to 0 that they're selling just land. There's no square footage. So that's a good thing to understand as well. Determine the R squared coefficient, discuss what it means, and conclusions, reflect on the relationship between square feet and sales price by answering the following questions. So is there square footage for homes in your selected region different for homes in the overall US? That's going to be looking at this sheet here and comparing. So some of that we're not going to get into too much detail. I just want you guys to understand the overall concept. That way, when you go to work on the report, you have your original thoughts and your intuition and your insight there. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at the spreadsheet and talk about how we get these results. So last week we came up with this really pretty scatter plot, which I know everybody had so much fun doing. So now everyone's going to have even more fun coming up with the linear regression for it. See, I will get some of you guys excited about that. So as you saw from last week, I posted that video about that function versus the regression results. And again, you're going to get the same result. So it doesn't matter, but the idea is that you need to figure out what works best for you. So I'm going to go through and use the data analysis pack because I got to be honest, I really like the way the output looks compared to the output from the linest function. So it's not that it's easier or harder. So we're going to go to data, Data analysis, again, regression's already selected because you can tell I've been working in a regression. So see, it's got some stuff here highlighted that I don't care. I don't care about the state. So we need to make sure and change that. So our Y is going to be the, let me make sure I've got the right column, the listing price. So that's this median listing price right here. That's our F column. And be careful with saying F or G, not in emails to me necessarily, but make sure you use the variable name, because it could be that someone has altered their spreadsheet where A in one spreadsheet might be different than A in another spreadsheet, and might actually be C. So it's more important to make sure you note the variable that you're talking about and not just the column. All right, so that was our Y range because we want to predict the listing price, and then we need to select the median square footage variable. All right, and so you can see here my results from the assignment 2, so make sure you do not highlight those. So it should be 2 through 31. And then I'm going to make my output go a little bit below my spreadsheet just so I can see it, or not my spreadsheet, my scatter plot. All right, and that's it. Click OK, and we get these nice, pretty little, although that one's not quite, there we go. Now it's real pretty. Table that gives us all of our results. All right, so let's see what that means now. So I'm gonna make this a little smaller so I can see this with my other screen. Okay, so we have all these results here, and for the first part, we just need to find our regression equation. We need to look right here at our coefficient. So this is our slope, and that's our intercept. It's very nice that it says intercept so that we know which one is which. Oops. So here we have, okay, we have y equals, so our slope goes first. We're going to do 106 point, we'll just do 0.7 since we don't have a ton of room right here, plus 45488.22. So that would be our regression equation. So that would be that first step to provide the equation. The next is to determine R and what it means. What is the relationship between the variables? All right, so the next part is determine R, the correlation coefficient. So where you find that in the result is right here where it says multiple R. I know that's kind of an odd name and when you guys are looking at it, but that's what it is. So you have R is here and then your R squared is here. So just as a high level thing, I'm not going to get into the analysis of how it applies here because I do want you guys to think about this. Remember, your R tells you, your correlation coefficient tells you how correlated these variables are. If it's your R is always going to be between -1 and 1. The closer it is to -1, the stronger the negative correlation is. The closer it is to 1, the stronger the positive correlation is. So you see right here in this example, it's about 0.53. It's not real strong. It isn't weak because it's not 0, but it's not real close to 1. So we would definitely say there's some correlation. It's moderate, like we talked about in the 2.3 challenge activities. But that's just something to keep in mind. Now the R squared, so the next part, well, I guess they don't ask about R squared for a little bit. The next thing they talk about are the slope and intercept. So remember, we found those right here, and that's also part of your linear regression equation. Remember, your slope tells you for every unit increase in X, so in this case, it's going to be the square footage for every unit increase in X, it tells you the increase in the Y value. In this case, that's the listing price. So keep that in mind when you're interpreting this and make sure to put a little extra insight into there and use your stuff. And remember, the intercept tells you what your Y value is when your X is equal to 0. So in this case, it talks about that's a land-only sale. And it mentions that in the bullet points from the prompt. So make sure to take that into account. Again, include some insight there. All right, the next thing on the bullet points were to determine R squared coefficient. Here's your R squared. Your R squared talks about to what extent the variance of one variable can explain the variance of the second variable. So it's important to know that it's somewhat talks about how dependent they are on one another, but it's talking about the variance in them. So keep that in mind when you're interpreting that for the prompt. All right, so then in your conclusions, it says reflect on the relationship. Reflect on the relationship between square feet and sales price by answering the following questions. So it talks about, is there square footage for homes in your selected region different than for homes all over the United States? So let's take a quick look if I can find it. All right, so we have this national sheet here. So you have just a 30 observation sample from a certain region. So what you need to do then is come take a look at these statistics here, and it talks about the square footage. So you need to look specifically at the square footage. Here we have median square foot, median dollars per square foot, and median listing price. So you can consider the mean and the min, like your range, the min and max, the range, and compare what your sample has to what the overall national statistics are. Okay, for every 100 square feet, how much does the price go up? That's using the slope. So make sure to pay attention to your slope. If you don't know, try plugging in a couple of numbers into your linear regression equation and see what happens. Like plug in 100 or maybe 1,000 and then 1,100 and then 1,200 to see what happens. But you should be able to determine that from looking at the equation, the regression equation also. Use the regression equation to estimate how much you would list your house for if it was 1,200 square feet. When it says that, that means you're plugging in 1,200 for your X and you're seeing what Y you would get out, okay? Let's go back. Sorry, I should have had this up so you could follow along. Okay, so that was this bullet point. What square footage range would the graph be best used for? So consider what range you use to develop that regression model and think, can you use this model on square footage that was not included in the development? So let's say, for example, your range of square footage was 1,200 to 2,000, and then somebody comes in with this like 4,000 square foot home. Can you use this model on that 4,000 square foot home? Does that make sense? Talk about that. Like, do you have any alternatives that you could use to make that prediction? Is there anything else you could consider being an issue or why it would work? Again, like I mentioned last week, I'm not looking for 100% perfect, you know everything. I don't expect any of you to know everything. I really want to hear your thoughts. I want you to tell me what you think, like what your insight is. That's what's important here, is to think about it. Look at the big picture and then answer all the questions. The most important thing is that you answer all the questions and show a basic understanding. If you have any questions about this or how to do it or what the questions mean, let me know. I hope this helps and good luck this week.